You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me, as always, Kevin Durso. Kevin, how are you, buddy?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's been a bit of a weird week in Flyerland. We've had some days off, some trips.
But no, a weird week in Flyerland, you don't say.
Well, we'll be diving into that as we get in here. Before we do, make sure you're following us on social media at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso, everywhere except for Blue Sky, where he's just at Kevin Durso. Follow or find us where you can find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com as well. So we have a couple of games to talk about this week. I think they're going to end up getting overshadowed by the larger issue, but let's start by kind of focusing on these three games because it is that time of year again. It is the the West Coast road trip, Christmas edition. And as usual, it features the California teams. It featured Vegas, and then it will be coming to a conclusion tonight at time of recording against Toronto. We'll talk about that game a little bit later in the show in our looking ahead section. But the three games here, 2 in California, 1 in Vegas. Overall, Kevin, what did you see out of the boys? I thought, for me personally, I thought this was a decent week if you're a fan of the Flyers getting the number 1 overall pick.
I think you could say that a lot of times about the way that they've played lately. I don't think it was like, I know some of the scores are going to be reflective of kind of a bad week. I don't think it was as bad as some of the scores indicated. Now, I don't think, like, we're going to get into different issues kind of going across the board here that really all kind of center back to one thing in particular. One game of which this week was very good, except for one key detail that we'll get into. I don't think, like, look, I won't even overshadow it. The goaltending is going to be a popular topic. It already has been. If you're on social media, you've seen it's been a popular topic. I don't think that the goaltending was necessarily as horrific in the game against LA as it was. Look at some of the mistakes that were being made throughout the course of things. Like, you can't have prolonged defensive zone shifts against Anze Kopitar's line. You can't make a play at both ends of this play, like Igor Zamula and Travis Konechny make late in the second period. That's direct turnover, breakaway, goal. Like, can't make those kind of mistakes. So I don't want to pin so much of this on the goaltending. Not that doesn't mean that there wasn't one in the game that probably you want back. It's not like it was the whole picture. You win the game probably if you don't make the obvious mistakes in that. Not necessarily the goaltending portion of it, though. Like I don't know. Are we talking about a win in LA if they don't turn the puck over at the end of the second period and make that a 1-goal game again? They're up 4-2. You're playing a pretty darn good game through 2 periods. You've got yourself positioned to really make that, after a pretty crazy first period where there's goals aplenty, you find yourself with the 2 goals of the second period and a lead. Okay, that's great. And you essentially give it right back. Now it's 4-3. And you kind of just spend the entire third period waiting for the inevitable, waiting for that goal. And in both cases, like, it's just Kopitar going around the net. He doesn't actually shoot the puck at any point. They're deflections. Everything was deflections. And again, and it was another situation where, like, even down to the eventual game-winning goal is almost, it's at least 2 problems that have been pretty persistent resurfacing again, because it's a power play goal. So your penalty kill has been pretty rough lately. And it's a goal right off of a face-off. I mean, it came 5 seconds into a power play. You take a penalty, you give them, I think it was the first power play the Kings had in the game, no less. And so their first chance to do anything, and 5 seconds later, the puck's in the net. And now you're trailing. Like, that's just a bunch of issues kind of rearing their ugly head again at the wrong time against a really good team, no less. Like, let's not gloss over the fact that the Kings have been a really good team this year.
Kings are a really good team. Yeah.
Now, you want to shift gears to San Jose and you go in and you do exactly what you're supposed to do? Sure. Literally the only downside of the San Jose game, as far as I'm concerned, is Sam Ersson gets hurt again.
Well, and there it is. Right. So
but that's about it. Like, everything else that's going on in that San Jose game up to that point And it was a slow, like, let's be clear, it was kind of a slow grind to get to this point because you play half the game, you have one goal. It's a 1-0 game. Well, 1-0 game. You think it's 2-0 at one point. That's offside. It gets called back. Which, by the way, that offside call, even though it's correct by the video review, it's one of those debatable things in hockey by the rule where it was like they reset the clock back like 37 seconds. So it's like it clearly doesn't affect whether or not the goal is scored. It's not a direct result of the offside, but it is offside. So yes, by letter of the law, it's no goal, and I get that. But it's something I see all the time when it happens where it's like, do we really need to have offside challenges for stuff that happens 30 seconds prior to a goal?
Yeah, I've seen people speculate on this about putting a timer in, like if the goal is scored within 10 seconds, you can review it or whatever the number is. And I don't think the NHL would put a time on it, right? Because then you're sitting there with a stopwatch and you're reviewing if it was 10 seconds or 11 seconds.
Well, there's people that want,
doesn't even.
One of the ones I've seen is there's people who want offsides to not be a challenge anymore and be something that, like in the NFL, where they automatically review turnovers, automatically review touchdowns,
Like just get automatically scanned through for offsides.
That you're already looking at it so that a team doesn't have to make that call, so you can then make that call.
I'm cool with that.
Kind of replay, kind of replay assisted instead of saying, well, the coach has to challenge offside every single time.
I'm not a review everything person, right? I'm not sitting here going, oh, well, you should be able to review penalties. You should be able to review this, that, the other.
Sure.
But I think in situations where you can get a video assisted replay, right? Soccer has been using VAR forever. Tennis has been using it forever. I mean, God forbid we just get sensors in the pucks, but that's a whole different.
Well, they keep trying. They keep trying that in international play.
I know, but
at World Juniors, they do have tracking in the pucks right now. So, like, it is something they try.
And it's great, totally. No, the NHL won't allow that out. That's a whole different thing.
I think when you challenge something, though, it should come down to one of those situations where, like, offside is offside. There's no changing that. If you're offside, you're offside. Can it be missed in the moment? Absolutely. Can it be easy to go back and make that an automatic review? Absolutely. That's one of the most common ones. If you want to challenge for missed stoppage because it's not as clear cut, or goalie interference because it's certainly not as clear cut, be my guest. That's discretion of the coach more than it is like the. Although you could argue, you could make the same argument for missed stoppage, honestly, because that's again something where you should check all aspects of a play to make sure that it's legitimate. And the only thing that really should come into question is goalie interference, because that is more of a discretion call over. I'm not like the official is not supposed to be. I'm looking at your goalie to make sure he doesn't get hit. I'm watching where the puck went. It goes in the net. I say goal. If I saw the contact, I'll call it. But if I don't see it, I'm going to call goal. And then we can go and look, and we might not know what the hell it is, but we're going to try.
Well, and we do already get some amount of video assistance from Toronto. Like every once in a while, you'll see a shot that looks like it hits the crossbar and goes right back out.
And then they stop play a few seconds later.
30 seconds later, they blow the horn over the stadium because Toronto saw a goal and called down to the scorer's box.
Right. I think what people want to see is it in the opposite direction. Like that's I'm calling no goal, it hit the post, and then they are able to go and check because the overhead cameras give it all away and sit there and go, nah, we're gonna put a halt to this right now, and then we go back and we can reset the clock. And by that point, they've done all the work. They've got the time. They know exactly what the deal is. The officials just go look to communicate with them for all of 15 seconds. Right. Yep. And then we're back at it. This is the opposite, because what I'm saying, like, I think what people want is when a goal is scored, can we go check all of the pieces of the puzzle to make sure we've got a legitimate goal, which they kind of do to a degree. Like, if you've seen any of these mic'd up videos where the official is mic'd up, one of the officials is over at the penalty box with one of the off-ice officials who is on the horn with Toronto, I would imagine, and getting kind of and they wait until they look over and they give the other official who's going to drop the puck a thumbs up, like, we're good, roll play.
Yeah, and you'll even see, like, if there's an entrance into the zone that the team thinks is kind of sketchy, they'll start looking at the video right
Oh
away.
yeah.
Like you see him on the bench, like play is still going on. The puck hasn't even gone in the net yet, but they're already looking at the video so that if it does, they know if they're challenging or not.
That's
All,
also because there's whole members of your coaching staff technically that are part of this too. You've got video teams,
exactly.
but that's their job. They're not even on the
And
bench.
and I think all you're suggesting is kind of a more formalized, centralized in-house process for that.
Right.
So it doesn't
Well,
rely on the teams
because
having to challenge it. It's already been looked at by the eyes in the sky.
I think because of the fact that there is so much at risk if you challenge and then it's wrong again, kind of in a way.
Yes.
Like if
And
you
I
take
am
that
in
out of
favor.
play.
By the way, I am in favor of the penalties for wrong challenges. I think that is
Sure, I agree with that too.
bueno.
Like, especially if you're willing to take the chance on gray area like goalie interference. That for
Mhm.
sure. I get it. Offside, like I said, though, offside is offside. So if you think you're challenging for a play that looks offside and then it's wrong, you're now penalized for having to challenge something that probably could have been checked anyway without the challenge, so that you could just sit there and go, then it doesn't require it. They do that, and that's what comes back. You know, in the same way, like, look, I assume that you can challenge something further, I guess, like just like in the NFL, I suppose, like you can challenge something further after they do one check of something, you know, for because they don't check every aspect of these plays. They only check a certain portion of it. They get that part right, and then they sit there and they say, well, if you want to go and have us look at this, that's on you. You know, but it's a complex matter. Let's go back to the other parts of the game.
Yeah,
It's a 1-0. So no, it's a 1-0 game, and it's more than halfway through the game. So you're there. So there's elements of this game that are getting dicey to a degree, because it's like, okay, you're still like kind of struggling your way through the Sharks, you know, to a degree, and then they just get the 2 quick goals in the second that kind of eases everything for a little. It's 3-0, and listen, I think John Tortorella hinted at this at one point in time. I certainly understand where it came from, because you go into the third period and you have to change goalies all of a sudden. I don't know. That 3-goal lead is not necessarily safe there. Goalie's coming in cold. The goalie hasn't played that well. And now you've got to protect the 3-goal lead. And I think scoring 2.5 minutes into the period was a calming moment. It's like,
absolutely.
now
it's a big insurance goal too.
Because now it's 4-0. Now there's even less time. Now you've got 17.5 minutes to work with.
Right. Well, now, and even if they slip 2 quick bad ones by you, you still have a 2-goal lead. Whereas before you would have only had a 1-goal lead.
And listen, and this is what I was alluding to as we kind of like we'll get to the goal when we'll get to the goaltending discussion much more in depth after we touch on the Vegas game. But during the Vegas game, I put something out on social, and the end of this San Jose game is part of what I was alluding to in terms of, you know, Kolosov comes in cold in this game and then looks really good. Makes a bunch of great saves in close, point blank. Looks like, you know, I mean, listen, that looks elite, honestly. Like it's got all the makings of, like, and listen, you don't want to give up chances like that all the time, but it looks elite at that given moment.
Well, and he was doing it against the Sharks' high danger players. He's doing it against Will Smith. He's doing it against Macklin Celebrini. He's doing it against like the guys who are going to be a threat, right? Because you can say, well, it's the Sharks. Anybody could look good against the Sharks. He looked good against the Sharks who belong in the NHL.
Right. Absolutely. And because what did Celebrini end up with that night? He had 6 shots on goal. Like
something like that, yeah.
Like by far and away the best player on the ice for San Jose. Again, just like it was in Philly. Honestly, he was one of the
really
best.
good.
Yeah, he's really good. I'm not taking anything away from it. And the thing was like that was a night like in LA. Michkov comes back from not playing, and we had just had the discussion. We actually weren't sure as of Sunday morning when we recorded last week. Is he even going to play? It's all shaping up like he's going to get scratched. Then he plays, has a multi-point game, snaps out of the pointless drought, scores a goal, all of this type of stuff. It's all good for him, obviously. And he made plays in the San Jose game, but he didn't get the payoff in the San Jose game. So it kind of looked like, look, Celebrini gets nothing either for his efforts because they didn't score. But there were definitely periods of the game where I'm sitting there going, Celebrini's been better than Michkov tonight. at certain points. And then Michkov
He's
had a
really
few
good.
Michkov had a few moments where it's like, hey, listen, you're making better plays than Celebrini is at this given moment. Like it kind of was like it was very close. It was a very even game between the two of them if you're doing the rookie matchup, and it just mattered where, like, which direction one went. Who's higher up and playing better at this given moment. Second period, as the Flyers turned it on a little more, Michkov's playing better because there's more happening for the Flyers at that moment. Third period, when you're defending at that point, it's 4-0. It's not, the Sharks are trying to get back into the game. The Sharks are definitely going to try to get positioning on a goalie that just came into a game. I thought Celebrini was way better in the third period. Had a way better third period all over the place. Probably could have scored twice if he didn't get robbed.
Yes.
Like that kind of thing. Then you go over from that. So like, and that's why, like, I sit there and I look and I go, if you would have said coming out of the holiday break, they're going to win in Anaheim, they'll end up losing to LA, and they'll win against San Jose, I think everybody would take that as an expectation. They're supposed to win those other two games. Yeah, LA's tougher, but the only thing you're disappointed with in the LA game is that, again, you led 4-2. That's disappointing. You've got to, like, I don't care where you are in a rebuild. I don't care what you're trying to accomplish from a roster standpoint. Collectively, as a team, you've got to learn how to lock down leads when you get them. That's just part of the equation. That's part of the learning process. And they're nearly halfway through a season where they have not figured that part of the game out because they've let a lot of leads slip away. So they're figuring that out. So you get to the Vegas game, which is the first taste of 2025 you're going to get for this team. And you couldn't start the game any better. You scored 21 seconds into the game. The line that you cannot touch right now does it again. I mean, like, how many weeks ago does it feel like we were having a conversation about nobody else is scoring on the team? If it's not Konechny and Michkov, then nobody is scoring. And now all of a sudden you look up after the last game and go, Tyson Forster's got 11 goals, by the way. We're not even halfway through the season. Now Tyson Forster's got 11 goals.
And has looked really good over the last couple of weeks. Has taken a bit more responsibility, has stepped up and taken a chunk of minutes. And that line, Forster, Cates, Brink, has been a night in, night out, probably the Flyers' most consistent line for several weeks now.
Right. Like think about this from Forster's perspective. Okay, Konechny's obviously leading the team in goals and has scored in back-to-back games now, so he kind of snapped out of his own little drought to a degree. So he's up to 18. Okay. And again, we're not even by the games played total, we're not even halfway through the season yet. So Konechny's going to go into about the halfway point of the season on pace for roughly 36, 38 goals probably. Not bad at all.
If he accelerates, he can touch 40.
If he scores in both games that they have that would get them to the halfway point, yes.
Well, sure.
So that's why I'm willing to give him one. I think he absolutely has the ability to score one goal at some point over these next two games, and he'll be on pace for 38 as of the halfway point.
And that's about right, just under half a goal a game.
Right. Well, not even that. It's just you're not going to argue with he's always a 30 goal scorer, and now he's got the chance if he really heats up at some point to touch 40. And it's there. He's on pace for 36 no matter what.
And I think something that people aren't really talking about, I have a feeling going and getting to play with Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon and all
you think that might elevate him?
I think Travis Konechny's going to come back with something to prove. Like, sure, you see these guys playing against them night in, night out in the NHL, but when you're in the locker room with, 2 stalls down from Connor McDavid for 2 weeks,
I got another theory for you.
Dig the F in,
yeah.
Right?
Oh.
Come on, man.
Yeah, I hear you.
Like, there's a different level.
Well, I have another theory for you about that too, because like it's a 2-week tournament. I think at most they play 5 games. If they make it all the way and play for the title, right?
Yeah. Yep.
There's no way on that roster that Travis Konechny is getting the minutes that he would get as a Flyer.
Unless he ends up on somebody's wing, unless he ends up as Connor McDavid.
I don't think that a team, I'm talking about when it comes down to crunch time, if you're in a tie game, You are rolling. I don't
He's
care
not
what.
getting
Right.
right.
You are not rolling the combination of I'm keeping my lines together. You are throwing Crosby, McKinnon, McDavid, and your two best defensemen in a tie game. And if you're trailing, you're adding another forward to it. Probably.
If anybody from NHL 06 remembers, Travis Konechny is not going to be on your hero line.
A good call.
The last 5 minutes of the game, you can put out your hero line. It's all your best players. Travis Konechny is not on that line for Team Canada. I agree with you.
No, so what I'm saying is that in that situation, even not in that situation, to be honest, because like I don't think he'll with all of the players that team has, I don't think he ends up on a McDavid wing per se. Like I think
it depends on exactly how that lineup is constructed.
Sure, and we'll see that, I guess, when it happens. But my point is, I just don't think he's going to get I don't see him playing 20 minutes a night.
You think he gets penalty kill time?
I don't know, because now they've taken him off the penalty kill here.
Yeah.
To try to keep his offense going. Now, I mean, he might in this situation where you have a bunch of guys who I don't know if you want them killing penalties.
I was say, do you want Connor McDavid killing?
Well, no, he doesn't anyway.
That's fair.
Right,
and
he
even
doesn't
if he
anyway.
did, he probably could.
Now, are they going to let Crosby kill penalties? I could see that. You need somebody. Well, one of those centers has to be able to kill penalties.
Brayden Point.
There you go. Sure.
He's a monster.
That's what I'm saying. You need to have somebody's got to. But
I can't wait.
So I wonder if he gets a boost not only from playing around and being in a locker room with those guys like you're talking about, but also
I think he will.
It's not a full on. This is not 5 extra games with 20 plus minutes a night. It's probably 5 games with like 13 to 15 minutes a night.
A little bit more of a role.
Right. Where you're not necessarily, forced to give. I'm not saying forced to give it your all, but like, you know what I mean? You're not playing
you have to make the most
scope
of your opportunity.
And I don't know, like I want to see how much changes with him ice time wise if they aren't playing in penalty kill in Philly anymore right now. Like if you're taking him off, then I assume either your plan is to give him more 5-on-5 time, or your plan is to reduce his ice time altogether.
Let him rest up a little bit, right? If you think
one or the other,
use it a little too much.
But my point is, okay, so like my point with the goal scoring thing was, so Konechny's leading the team with 18, and we've known that for a while. Like he's been the leader, obviously. Michkov's at 12, and the 12th was hard to come by for a while. Like he was on 11 for a really good chunk. Owen Tippett's been better of late. Definitely picked up some more offensive numbers over the last roughly month. But even he's at 11. And then Tyson Forster's at 11.
Man, Tyson Forster tied for third on the team in goal scoring.
But I want you to think about how much of that has come while this hot streak has been going on for this line, which is, again, basically a month. Like since the first LA game, which was December 19th, that's only 7 games ago. 2 goals against LA, 1 against Columbus, 1 against LA again, and 1 against Vegas. That's 5 was 11.
All for a kid who doesn't turn 23 for 2 more weeks.
Yeah, by the way, there's a lot of birthdays right now. Like every other day, they're posting another birthday. Apparently today's Cam York's. Apparently, they just had Kolosov's birthday was the other day.
Kolosov's birthday was the other day. Somebody was last week. They've had a couple of them.
Yeah,
wasn't there a day with like 2 of them recently? There's been a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, there's an easy way to tell you they're all on the roster. So,
well, I wonder how many of them are Decembers because of the whole annual nature of hockey, and you're old for your age year, and like all of that nonsense.
So let's see. Ryan Poehling was January 3rd, so it was the day after the Vegas game. January. That's Cam York is today. I know the goalies. So Kolosov was January 4th. So I've got the 3rd, 4th, and 5th right in a row. There actually aren't as many Decembers as you think.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. February is going to be busy. Noah Cates has a birthday in February. Nick Delorier, Joel Farabee. Here's another one. Owen Tippett's February. Like you got that whole list kind of going there. So yeah,
Regardless, for a kid who's 22 years old, the fact that Forrester, I mentioned, I think it was on last week's show, it might have been 2 weeks ago, that he's starting to feel a little more comfortable in the NHL, starting to get a little more comfortable with the day to day and what's expected out of him and what he
yes,
can produce at the NHL level. And I mean, we talked about the pace of Travis Konechny earlier. Tyson Forrester is looking in the 2025 range, hopefully, and that's a
right. And
really nice little
well,
piece.
and I think the important thing, because this happened to him last year too, was the second half it really started to come on. Like 20 goals did not seem possible going into January for him, and he ended up with it because he turned it on in the second half.
Yeah.
If he's now finding his groove in December, and it's like, oh, we got to what did I say now? It's the last 7 games. I think he's got 5 goals or something like
Yeah.
that. So that means that they had already played as a team anyway. They'd already played more than 30 games before he kind of finally hit a groove, and now he's almost doubled his goal total in less than 10 games. What happens if he adds another 5 and 10, the next 10 game segment or more for that matter? Like you just hit
Then
one of
he
these
starts
grooves.
he starts to threaten some serious numbers, and not just right now, but like the potential to do it for a long time because he is still a
Sure.
young player.
The thing about him is, and I know people get tired of of having to be patient with guys and things like that. And I understand how you can look at certain guys on the team and be at a point where you're like, they are what they are. I understand how that comes about. And even if everybody around you is telling you there's more to be unlocked, you may not want to believe that because you don't see it and don't feel like you're ever going to see it. Totally valid. I can't do this with someone who's not even 23 yet, less than 2 full seasons in the NHL, who gave you 20 goals in his rookie year and is now kind of quietly up to 11 in less than half the season. Like, I'm not, and that's not me sitting here saying, like, I'm not telling you that by the end of January, after the halfway point of this season, if you're sitting here looking at he's at 15, he might finish between 25 and 30. That means I'm going to go sign him to a 7-year deal. I know he's up for a contract this year. I would still bridge him.
My problem with bridging him is if
Is
you
what happens if he keeps doing it,
one, the cap goes
or
up.
better.
Well, what happened? So I talked a couple weeks on this show, a couple weeks ago on this show about the cap's probably going to go up pretty dramatically over the next couple of years.
Right.
Maybe as much as 10, 15, $20 million over the next 3, 4, 5 years. It's going to go up pretty significantly. You bridge him now, then in a couple of years he gets to sign the long fat contract extension with the cap knowledge.
Right.
Whereas if you sign him to the longer term deal now, even if it's a little bit more than you want to pay right this second, if the cap does what we think it's going to, it's going to look like an incredible steal long time.
Well, here's the thing too. And I think I talked about this pretty recently. What if the contract he gets when it comes down to it is the Joel Farabee contract?
I
Five
like
years,
Joel
5
Farabee.
years, $5 million. This way it's in between. It's a longer term deal. It's not the maximum long term, and it's not an over the top number from a
I
cap
like
perspective.
I like that deal a lot because that deal would do a couple of things. It allows you to get some savings on a good player now while the cap goes up. Work some things around your roster, hopefully get some extra pieces. At the end of that deal, you give them a nice number to take a raise off of. And at that point, you've seen the player for almost 8 full years, and you have a really good picture of what they are. Right?
Sure,
Like
and
he's still 22. We don't necessarily know what Tyson Forster is going to be as an NHL player, but in 5 years we will.
right, and well, like the hard part with some of this also is that like people don't want to have conversations like almost like what we're having right now. People don't want to talk about a guy who plays, by all accounts, if we want to be technical about it, and John Tortorella is not a technical guy when it comes to this particular thing, but if we want to be technical about what is he playing as, a third liner right now? And what do we like about him? Or what do they like about him? Well, he's a good forechecker, and then he does have scoring ability. I'm not taking that away, but he's a good forechecker. Like, people don't want to hear about that anymore. They don't want to hear about that. And they look at and I'm not saying that means that people want to get rid of Tyson Forster per se, but they don't want him as one winger and oh, we've seen Joel Farabee all these years, and it's always kind of the same struggle. And we've seen, how many more years of Scott Lawton before you decide like we have enough of that guy, or whatever. I remember having a conversation. I had a conversation yesterday actually about it because at one point in time, something came up about I was watching. This is a buddy of mine who's a Bruins fan, so we were watching the Bruins game, which was kind of like pre-education for me. It was like a pre-scout for me because they were playing Toronto, so that's relevant. And we're watching, and Trent Frederick scored a goal, and I turned around and I said something about how if you're trying to talk about the Flyers getting a guy who's got some grit to him, but skill and doing all this, the kind of like who's a player who people would say like that fits that description, that's got some skill to his game, that can do stuff offensively, but has the sandpaper to his game that drives people crazy. Like it's one of the most obvious guys that you love to hate from everybody else, but if you had him, you'd love him.
You're talking on the Flyers?
What's this? No, not on the Flyers. It's someone in the league, but it is someone in the league. So what is one of the most obvious players that we would talk about on a regular basis? Can't stand the guy probably, but if he was on your team, you would love him.
Are we talking about Tom Wilson?
Exactly.
Okay.
And the thing is that I sit there and Trent Frederick does not go in the same sentence as Tom Wilson.
No.
If you are pointing at Trent Frederick and saying that's a Tom Wilson type player, congratulations, you've got one. It's Scott Lawton. And people are fed up with the idea that, well, Scott Lawton, it's all about the culture, all that stuff, right? And I'm not disagreeing with part of that, where it's like Scott Lawton is what he is. You know what he is. You've known what he is and what he's going to be for 3 years now.
Frankly, you've probably known what Scott Lawton is for
5 years. Well, yeah, I was going to go more than
pretty close to 10, honestly.
Kind of. But my point is that if you're trying to elevate yourself to somebody who's got all of those skill sets, it's not a guy who plays on somebody else's third line either. You know what I mean? It's just not. You can look at half of these guys on the roster and sit there and say, yes, are half of these guys replaceable eventually? Of course they are. It's not like if frankly, there's any.
Listen, we've talked about this building process being a lot about who is going to be on this roster to be playing with Matvei Mishkov when we're competing for Stanley Cups.
Right now, but here's can I counter with something that I've been thinking about for a little while at this point, because and I'm just going to be blunt about it. I'm going to go this is like a torts moment for me, if you will. Like I'll pound the desk kind of material at this point, because here's the thing.
So you're going to give one word answers and then leave?
No, I'm not going to give one word answers and leave. Very funny though. What was the conversation we had last week? Because I asked you, because we're sitting here talking about, okay, like the week that they had leading up to the Anaheim game. You're losing 7-3 to Pittsburgh. You lost 7-3 to LA. These kind of games that just are awful, right? You don't want to get run out of the building kind of material, right? But you're trying to rebuild something. You're trying to build a contending team potentially, right? And in doing so, is there a right way to do it? Because we could sit there. Who did I bring up last week? I brought up the Buffalo Sabres. And I said, you could end up with, like Buffalo did, 2 first overalls, 2 second overalls, 4 8th overalls, 8 years of picking in the top 10. And it doesn't mean you're keeping those players, and it doesn't mean that those players that do stick around are making you necessarily any better. We're talking about a team that this past week had a lead on the Colorado Avalanche and blew it. Straight up just blew it. To the point where, do you know where they're ranked in the Eastern Conference? Dead last.
As we say, is it dead last?
Yep.
Well, and then
the team that everybody said after 13, 14 years is, oh, now it's go time. They should make the playoffs. Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power and look at the goalie. They got 2 young goalies in the system. That should help them too. And also play right. Like, you can do this for years and years and years, and it does not mean you're going to be good. And I'm going to tell you right now, go look around the league collectively. There are a total of, as of this morning, there are 2 teams in the league that have a points percentage higher than 700. There are maybe There are maybe 7, if I'm counting correctly here. I think there's 7 that even have a points percentage higher than 650. And then I go to the bottom and I see there's only 2 teams in the league that have a points percentage lower than 400. Which means that the rest of the league is average. Half of the teams in this here we go. This is what I was trying to build up to. Half of the teams in the NHL suck. There you go.
You know,
they do. They do.
So where's the cutoff? I'm looking at the league standings right now. Does St. Louis suck?
Kinda. They're 512 points percentage in half of a season. You are 19, 18, and 4. And you fired your coach this year. Like, factor in all of those other little details too. Teams that have fired their coaches with 500 records, basically. Like, just because Boston's won a few games after firing their coach and has looked better, does that make them that much better? They're 14th in the league. They're not a world beater.
Well, and I think we're going to end up seeing what we kind of always see in the NHL. There is somewhere between 6 and 8 teams that are actually legitimate contenders.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's another probably 15 to 20 that kind of sit somewhere in the middle. Right. And then there's the absolute bottom feeders.
And the 15 to 20 has a tier list of its own that you can sit there and say, here's a group that make the playoffs every year because they're not bad enough. Here's a group of teams that don't make the playoffs every year because they're not good enough. And then there's like the wild cards in the middle. And that's about
Philadelphia Flyers.
No, I wouldn't even count them because when was the last time they
were on the way to the bottom?
Right. When was the last time they made the playoffs? Think about this. This is a team that has won a handful of games over the course of the last month. Not many, right? Like the Flyers, not one many. And somehow or other, with the type of month they just had in December, are 2 points out of a playoff spot, but also 3 points out of being the last place team in their division.
How does that would be a top 5 pick as well?
Well, right, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, so how are you supposed to evaluate any team that sits in that position?
Everyone's just so bad.
Because at the end of the day, I'm sitting here looking at the Flyers' problems, whether it's the penalty kill being bad lately, all the goals that are scored off of faceoffs, the goaltending, the defensive coverages, you name it, whatever you want to consider a problem. And I'm going, guess who else hasn't figured out their problems? The New York Rangers. Guess who else hasn't figured out their problems? The New York Islanders. Guess who else hasn't figured it out? The Buffalo Sabres.
Thanks, Gary. Here's that parody you wanted so bad.
And there's nothing wrong with parity. Like, if you have teams that are on the cusp of being the problem is you don't want to have 18 teams that are middle to average, mediocre to average, and that's what you got.
I think that's what you get with a salary cap that has not moved significantly in half a decade. In a league where, like, how many teams since 2020, 2021 have sold assets purely for draft picks and cap space?
Right.
Marc-Andre Fleury won the Vezina and then was traded. Who was the goal he was traded for? You couldn't pronounce it when it happened, and you definitely don't remember it now. The guy hasn't played hockey in 2 years, and he was traded for the Vezina winner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what I'm talking about. And like, that's
good segue, by the way.
When I talk about this cap expansion, going up 5 million this year, 10 million next year, like making these big dramatic jumps, the sport needs it desperately.
Well, the sport needs it desperately for 2 reasons. Well, it needs it desperately for 2 reasons. One, to give teams at the bottom a chance to dig themselves out of cap hell, and the other reason is so that quite honestly, so players like Connor McDavid get paid the way they're supposed to get paid.
Well, and that's the other thing. Totally.
Like, honestly, the fact that you could, like, I know that there's a specific niche audience for hockey. I get that. I've always gotten that. If you went around and asked, and I saw this as a video fairly recently, where people can probably pretty easily figure out in a matter of 5-10 seconds, probably with maybe they do get it on the first guess. Maybe it takes 3 or 4, honestly, but you could rattle off 4 NFL players really quick to try to figure out who's the highest paid NFL player, because you have a list in your head that you go, well, it's got to be this guy. And if someone tells you no, then you go, okay, well, then it's probably this guy or this guy. And the next thing you know, you've gotten it because you rattled off one of the 4 names that seems pretty obvious, right?
Yep.
And NBA is kind of the same way. You can probably pretty quickly figure out, oh yeah, this guy. You know what I mean? Like you start to think of the best players and you kind of figure it out. People would not be able to. I mean, and it's not like the highest paid player in the NHL is something not obvious.
The
It's
richest
Austin.
contract.
It's Austin Matthews.
I was going to say the richest contract in NHL history was just signed by Austin Matthews.
Right. So it's not like it's not somebody obvious, but everybody who, if you asked two different questions, you would get if you asked who the highest paid player in the NHL is, and asked as a secondary question who's the best player in the NHL, you're going to get the same answer, and one of the answers is going to be wrong. Because you're gonna get Connor McDavid, right? Like if you ask somebody who's the best NHL player today and who is the highest paid player in the NHL, you're gonna answer Connor McDavid for both, and you're wrong in one of those questions right now.
Well, and some of it's contract length and the fact that he signed that contract 6 years ago at this point.
Sure, I do get it, but you know what I mean.
So Austin Matthews just signed the richest contract in NHL history. His contract value is number 1 in the NHL. Do you know where he would rank in pay among NBA players?
Oh, it's ridiculous. It's like over 300 players.
118th.
Okay, it's I was gonna say that there are 6 men in the
NBA. There's only like 300 players in the league. But
that's what I was getting at. There's 6 men in the NBA who make more money than Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews do.
Right. We're talking about the NBA where your 5-man starting roster plays most of the game. Obviously, your bench rotates in, but those 5 dudes play most of the game, and you only have somewhere between 9 and 12 guys on your roster any given night. Right. Austin Matthews gets paid by like an 8th guy.
Yes.
Like a 7th. Like it's crazy.
Yep.
He makes about as much money, if you're an NBA fan and listening to this, he makes about as much money as Austin Reeves.
Oh, I was gonna see, and I was gonna try to pull a Sixers reference for you because, like, I'm pretty sure that I'll do a quick Google search on it just to check because I don't know. Like, obviously, I don't know NBA contracts, but I got a funny feeling, and I don't know if he's again. I don't even really pay too much attention, but a player like Kelly Oubre, who is like typically a bench guy, I think he's like his season stats are like 12.8 points per game. It's not the elite of the elite, right? I'm pretty sure his contract, he does not make as much as Austin Matthews, but even a guy like that, who's not the first name that you say on a team at all, right, makes almost $8 million.
Nikola Jokic is making more money this year than Austin Matthews will make over his 5-year contract.
That's crazy.
Okay. Back to the NHL. So
yes,
we are coming back to this. Something that we've been kind of flirting around this whole show has been the goaltending issue. I will confirm here, I assume you've seen it on Twitter right now, but the Flyers have confirmed that Ivan Fedotov will start Sunday against the Toronto Maple Leafs.
It is confirmed.
Yes, they tweeted it. We are recording this before that show. You are probably listening, or for that game, rather. You are probably listening to this after that game. But we are recording it on Sunday morning in kind of our normal time slot. We'll be back next week, by the way. Make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube. And so we have Fedotov going tonight. He is getting his first start in a long time, his first action at all in a long time.
This is his first start since December 5th.
It's a big test. Obviously, you're in Toronto. First game in a while. You got to show up.
Well, let's put it this way. I'm not surprised this is happening.
I agree.
If not today, it would have been Tuesday, I think, because
he's got to play at some point.
Well, it's not just that he's got to play at some point. Absolutely the same way you've done for however long at this point, for the past month, basically. You give Aleksei Kolosov the chance at the first start. If he's your number 2, as you've said all along, then he gets the chance at the first start with Ersson on the shelf again. That's just obvious. Aside from the first Vegas goal, which is off the rush, and it's more about the positioning of the players than it is about the goalie, his positioning is terrible on the wraparound by Nick Hagan. I don't care that it hit off of Nick Seeler to go in. Like, after looking at it again, I don't care. His skate is on the outside of the post. He has no leverage to push off to get over. He's late reacting, and he just shouldn't be. So it's poor positioning on his part. The third goal is not only a backbreaker for the timing of it in the period, but also one that, by all accounts, looks like one where you just need a save. In that spot, you need a save, and you don't get it. And then if that wasn't enough, the fourth one, which again, I think hits his glove before going in, and then right after it goes in, they cut to the bench, and John Tortorella's expression told you everything you needed to know.
I'm surprised that he wasn't gesturing for Ivan Fedotov to get ready. Frankly, I think they cut to him because they were expecting to see him pointing at Fedotov and telling him to get his mask on.
Well, that was what happened after. What would it be? I guess the Pittsburgh game, because after the 4-goal first period against Pittsburgh, that with Ersson in goal, they had a shot of Tortorella coming out of the tunnel for the second period, and he taps taps Kolosov and basically says,
to be ready.
Be ready. Yep. And they didn't use him in the second period. They just waited until it was something like that. Or they got him out of there after the fifth one, and then he didn't give up anything until the garbage time goal with like 10 seconds left.
Yeah.
Which you just you hate to see from his numbers perspective, because he actually did play okay in relief there. But
yeah, Kolosov's looked good in relief when he's coming in relief for the most part.
Yeah, actually, you're not wrong. He
it's
like his relief appearances look great, and his other ones look terrible. Like every start he's had lately has been pretty rough.
Maybe you tell him that Fedotov's starting, and then about a half hour before the game, you let him know he's getting it. It's not tonight, of course.
No, I know, but it's one of these things where I think by the time the fourth one went in, they just were already too far down that path.
The game was over.
Well, and I think also that you're trying, now that you just found out 2 days before that game that Ersson's back on the shelf for at least some period of time.
Yeah.
Then now now at that point, you are using every ounce of practice time that you have to really ramp up Fedotov so you can get him ready for a moment like this. And I think at that point in time, you didn't want him in a game 2 days after realizing I've got to start this guy. So they had time to they practiced on Wednesday. They practiced Wednesday. They had a morning skate Thursday that I can only assume he took part in because he was not playing. He was backing up. They practiced yesterday. They have a skate this morning. He's now confirmed in. That's why I'm saying if it wasn't tonight, it was possibly Tuesday.
Well, and especially because Kolosov has not done enough to shut it down, right? He has not done enough. If he had come in and played well, and we could go, okay, he's our guy. Fedotov might sneak in at some point before Ersson gets back, but Kolosov's going to get the large portion of these starts.
Right.
And Kolosov has not played well enough to secure that. And I think if Fedotov comes in tonight and has a good start, I don't necessarily know if he starts on Tuesday, but I think he's back in a game by the end of the week.
Well, because you can't keep having situations where, and it's not even just Kolosov had 3 really good games in a row. I don't think played poorly against Colorado, which is a game he lost before the wins came for a little bit. I thought he looked really good in relief against Boston the first time around.
I agree.
Not the best relief appearance against Florida when he had to come in for Fedotov the last time. Had what I thought was a really, turned out to be a really strong game against Boston. Just got hit with the situations where kind of the situations where you sit there and you say, I need a save from a goalie, but it's not his, not an I need a save as in you're expecting the save as much. It's it would be really nice if I got the big save, like the breakaway for Marchand.
A save from a goalie could get you back in this, could save you.
Well, in that case, they're leading the game, and that's the tying goal, and Marchand gets a breakaway. That's what I'm saying. You want to get a save, you understand how you don't, and you end up losing the game in overtime. And then
it's a huge momentum swing either way.
No, and then he came back from the Boston game and won his next start against Detroit too. Gave up 1 goal, looked great. And then since then, though, it's been, again, it's if it wasn't a relief appearance, it's been terrible. 6 goals against LA, 5 against LA the next time around, and now 4 against Vegas. And
I almost wonder if he's the starter and other teams have a chance to look at a little bit of tape if they've got something figured out.
I think it's just, I don't even think it's about looking at, well, I guess there's a part of it where you could look at tape and figure it out. I think it's all fixable things, if you will, because
I don't disagree with that.
Because I think it's 1,000%. He's a smaller goalie, so you have to position yourself properly to take up as much of the net as possible. And Kolosov has a valuable skill that I think you need to be a legitimately good goalie in the NHL, the athleticism. If you can make those big acrobatic looking saves, I think you absolutely need to have that skill. But pretty much at this point, that's the one skill that shines through, and everything else is not very good. Like he's almost giving up, like at this point, he's giving up more goals on fundamental saves or ones that should be fundamental saves than he is on ones that he's making acrobatically.
Young Russian who relies on athleticism.
Oh, we've been down this road. I've been down this road 20 times.
Starter who can't stay healthy. Third guy who's okay sometimes. Man, this sounds familiar. Have you heard of the 2010 Philadelphia Flyers?
Or 2011 is what you mean? Because
Wow.
I assume the first thing you're comparing is Kolosov to Bobrovsky.
Yeah, I'm just kind of making a joke about that era, right? When you had names like Ray Emery, Brian Boucher, Michael Layton, Sergei Bobrovsky, all kind of floating around the Flyers crease over a couple of year stretch there.
Right. And let's put it this way. There are two, one of the big differences between Kolosov and Bobrovsky in this case, because everybody right away goes, so that means they're going to trade him at 23 and well,
and then he's going to win the Vezina the next year. Right.
Right. And here's the thing. Why did they trade Bobrovsky in the first place?
Because they didn't see a path to the crease.
Well,
they didn't see him as the starter.
You're half right.
Because you had Bryzgalov.
Well, that's more it. It's like yes, there was no. I'm saying you're right about there was no path to the crease, and they created that situation. But Bobrovsky saw it too, and basically said, "Get me the hell out of here." Then
why would I want to play behind this guy? You just
because he went from starting 50, he went from playing, I think in his rookie year, 56 games to playing 27 or 28.
Right.
Like, yeah, no kidding. No kidding. And
a decade-long extension.
And that's why I'm saying one of the big differences is if you're not in a position to sign big free agents, an Ilya Bryzgalov type is not walking through the door.
No.
Which is also why, like as much as I pose this as a question,
at least I hope not.
No, but as much as I pose this as a question on the thing, like what to do, like I see all this stuff all the time. I see a lot of different things out there where people are trying to speculate on, well, what could they do about the goaltending, whatever. Guess what? You know what the answer is? Nothing.
Wait.
Yeah, wait. I agree at this point. I agree 1,000%. I've kind of been on this for not necessarily on coming on the show and talking about it on a daily basis or a weekly basis or whatever, but I think we all get it by now. Aleksei Kolosov under normal circumstances would be in the AHL right now. Maybe not today because maybe he earns a call up with Ersson hurt, but when you had that situation, when you had at this point, when you had 3 healthy guys on the roster, Kolosov would be the guy in the minors continuing to develop and mold his game. Why? Because Sam Ersson is your number 1 at this point, has too much NHL experience, is not the guy you send down. And Ivan Fedotov is not a long-term solution. He's already 28. You think that Ivan Fedotov's on this team in 3 years? I get he's got a 2-year contract. He's got this year and next year. I think that's it. Because by that point, you're going to start to think about other options. You're going to have to. You have to think logically about Kolosov at that point. Because by that point, Kolosov's 24, 25 years old. Is he on the team in that sense? And is Ersson your 1 or 2? And what about the other 2 guys? And I actually thought it was a good thing, or at least it was worth noting, that Tortorella referenced the other 2 guys the other day. He actually referenced the 2 prospects. There's also guys in the organization. It's not just the 3 in front of me that I have to do all the know about. There's other guys. So you're waiting for that at this point, as far as I'm concerned. And not only are you waiting for that, but it's here's the other part of the equation. Because again, it comes back to kind of what do you want? Do you want them to go out and try to find a goalie? Somebody who's better? Somebody who, what did I text you on Thursday during the game? If not for the goalie, they're winning this game.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? They're beating Vegas if not for the goalie.
Absolutely.
Probably.
They were the better team for most of that game to the point where they should have won the game.
Or at least locked into a tie game.
Absolutely.
I'll level with that. Like one of the 5 goals that Vegas gets is an empty netter at the end, and you can easily look at least 2 of the goals and say, "Oh boy, that's
You'd like that one
rough."
back. Yeah. Yep.
I, and
You
I,
look at
I'm willing.
you'd like that was one
It's
back.
it's at least 2. I'm willing to go 3. I think it was 3.
It's one of those things where if the guy gives up 2 and it's your backup guy, you're fine with it. If it's your starter, you'd probably like him to stop 3 of them. Yep. So
But you got to realize what the situation is in front of you. You're being kind of held hostage by the fact that you are worried about whether or not this guy just sits there and says, "Then if I'm not on the NHL roster, I'm going home."
So we are being held hostage by that, and I'm not gonna detract from that, right? Like that is definitely a factor.
And
But the
listen, you
other
do also hope that he's changed his mind.
but the other thing that you're being held hostage by, whether you want to look at it this way or not, is Sam Ersson's injury history.
Sure.
And
you tell me he goes out with injury against San Jose, and the next day you get an update that is it's a lower body injury. He's not skating today. He's probably not playing against Vegas. Understood. All things understood there, but it's day to day. Do you really believe that?
No, because it sounds exactly like the update we got last time he got hurt, and
A
it's
month ago?
the exact same thing. Okay, he'll be out a month, and this was the exact same thing. Oh, he's day to day.
Well, no. See what you're saying. He ended up being out a month, but it started the same way. It's day to day.
But eventually they said, okay, well, it's going to be a month. You're right, and I just listen. I love Sam Ersson. I respect what he did for this team last year, picking up the mantle of starter when he should not have had to. I appreciate him taking this team on his back and attempting to drag it into the playoffs. I appreciate him doing all the right things, putting in all the work in the offseason, showing up to camp ready to go, looking good, looking ready to be the Philadelphia Flyers #1 starter.
Right.
You got to stay healthy, man.
I agree. And what I think is especially disappointing about this is that he has the really good game in Anaheim and he's pitching a shutout through 2 periods against San Jose, and he looks like the guy that you wanted to see come back after a bunch of bad starts. So it's like, oh, at least they're getting one of the stabilizers back. You felt like with the way those 2 games are shaping up, I can turn to Sam Ersson and get a quality goaltending performance again because he's given me 2 in a row.
Say
And
it
then
with
he
me.
doesn't finish.
Say it with me. What's the best ability? Availability.
But part of this equation also, and I'm kind of moving off of Ersson and back to the other 2 guys, because Ersson, if you go to Sam Ersson's numbers for a minute, collectively on the season, 302 goals against and an 884 save percentage, which was mainly hit hard by the fact that he struggled so bad in December. If you can get, but like, I want you to think about like another I'm going to try to pick out another goalie in the league because all of the Flyers.
I know that save percentages across the league are down.
Right. But this is what I'm getting at. You don't need you need a good quality goalie. I'm not saying you don't, but you don't need a goalie anymore. And I understand that there's a little bit of kind of a hypocritical statement in this because I know what Connor Hellebuck's numbers are. I get it. Yes, there's a guy out there who is giving you this kind of quality, right?
Well, and Toronto's been a pretty good team. New Jersey. I'm just looking at the top 5.
Toronto's been good. Toronto's been good, but what is Toronto doing? It's a pretty standard tandem at this point. It's not one guy. True. It's both of them.
Well, and I did also want to mention that tandem briefly because another goalie that the Flyers got rid of because he couldn't stay healthy is a guy named Anthony Stolarz who
is hurt again, by the way.
He is hurt again, but I believe he had the best goals against or the best save percentage in the league last year and is, top 5 in all those categories again this year.
Well,
and
he's leading in save percentage as of this morning, and his goals against is second. Pretty much honestly, if not for the fact that Connor Hellebuck is number 2 in save percentage and 1 in goals against, and obviously starts more games than Anthony Stolarz does, Stolarz would possibly be up for the Vezina.
I mean, and
it's not. It's clear, right? It is
still very well be nominated.
Nah, it's gonna come down to how many games you play. Because I'm looking at the next 2 guys behind him. Well, right. I'm looking at the next 2 guys behind him in goals against, and it's Markstrom and Gustafsson, and they're going to be the nominees.
They're number 1s.
Yeah, right.
No, I agree with that.
I mean, Gustafsson's third or tied with him not tied with Stolarz, tied with Hellebuck in save percentage, And that's actually one of the things that Markstrom's not near as good at. Markstrom's actually 14th in the league, and it's a 9/11 save percentage.
That's because the Devils are frauds.
I know what I will give you, as much as I know you say that or whatever. I don't know if you saw how they lost to the Sharks yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
So I saw how mad Markstrom was about it. That was pretty funny.
Well, because he knows he needs to make that save, and
Yeah.
the thing is that there's it's funny that I'm saying that because there's a little bit more leeway when your team is, I don't know, what are they at?
When you have some buffer in the standing.
24, 15 and 3, or at the time 24, 14 and 3, and it
Is that
cost
good?
you. You're right, and oh, I'm so sorry that one save that I didn't make in the final minute cost you one game in regulation when you have won more than half of your games and have a 607 points percentage and are ranked 8th in the league.
But all I'm saying is, coming back to the Flyers goaltending situation, trying to put a little bit of a bow on this here, is I think Sam Ersson right now is your most capable NHL goalie if he's healthy.
By far. Absolutely.
Yep. I think Kolosov has shown flashes. He has shown some talent. He has shown some promise. Needs to put it together a little bit more consistently. And then at this point, Fedotov kind of just has to make the most of his opportunities. He's not going to get many of them.
But there's an element where what is doing more of a service, and this is, I think, the bigger Kolosov discussion is exactly what it is. What's doing him more of a what's more of a service to him at this stage of his career? Getting thrown into the fire and giving up 5 goals a night, or playing at the AHL and trying to develop yourself into a really good AHL goalie where the competition is a little bit lesser than what you'd see in the NHL? Like kind of there's an element to me that kind of I sit there and I go, what do you expect him to do against the Kings, who, again,
we're a monster.
No, but again, league standings, the Kings are 6th in the league. Now he played Vegas the other day, who currently rank at the top of the league standings. What do you expect from a guy that raw? He's gonna give up goals. Not the sad part, but it's like the part that you really can't live with is against Vegas, for example. He gives up 3 that he's got to make saves on because you just want your goalie to be average. We're not even talking about at this point. There are I know that goaltending is a topic. It's a touchy issue in the city because of the fact that it's been a problem for so long. And I understand
40 years.
Right. And I understand that it is a touchy subject. What I'm trying to get at, though, is that at this point in time, you're not even looking to replicate the numbers of the best guys that have ever been. You're
just looking for league average.
Right. Nobody needs, guess what? Not even nobody needs. Nobody in the league practically, unless maybe you're Connor Hellebuck, is getting Martin Brodeur numbers anymore. That's gone. It's a thing of the past.
Nope. Oh, no, nobody's starting 60, 70 games anymore.
Absolutely and it's not even about the start numbers. You're not
talking about the lockdown numbers.
Well, I'm saying you're not getting from. You used to be able to, in a certain situation, there were enough good goalies in the league that you had a bunch of them who were giving you 220 goals against average and under, and now you might have right. And now you're lucky if you go into a game anymore and see like I look at 912 as a save percentage and go, holy crap, that's elite.
And it is at this point in time.
Right.
And the goal scorer,
that guy's an elite goalie for a 912 save percentage and a 260 goals against average.
Yeah, and we've been talking about offense rising in the NHL for years now. And obviously when offense goes up, that means goaltending goes down. Like, there is some push-pull to this.
Sure, and let's not ignore the fact that part of the problem is that in these last handful of games, whether you want to look at the LA games that they've played, to a degree, the Pittsburgh game, I don't think as strongly, that even the wins they've got, like the San Jose win, you're scoring some goals right now. Your offensive numbers have actually been up a little bit. Like, there was a stretch of time where they were winning games 3-2 regularly, and it's like, well, nobody can score. And then they'd lose a game 3-1 or 4-1, right? Now they're losing games 6-4 and 7-4 and 7-5 and stuff like that. It's like, I don't care who you are, what team you are, where you rank. If you score 5 goals in a game, you should win it. And league average goaltending would win it, right? Give up 3 goals a night, score 4, you still win the game. I know that's basic math, but you get my point. There's plenty of goalies in the league right now, even down to like I saw, like I think as of yesterday anyway, Sam Ersson and Cam Talbot have the same or have close. I think have the same goals against average.
Okay.
If you were getting Cam Talbot's save percentage over Sam Ersson's, which is obviously going to be better, how many more games do you think you'd win? Even still
Probably
giving
a
up,
bunch more.
the 3 goals a night that Talbot's giving up. And I'm not saying that means put Talbot in this situation. Teams are different. I get it. But
he's just stopping more shots.
But that's what I'm saying. It's a save percentage thing. Like it actually it really is infuriating to watch a team that for the most part plays some games where they give up maybe 20 shots in the game, but then give up 5.
Yep.
Like at some point in time, you get like you can't have these games where guys have 750, 800 save percentages and expect to be anywhere near successful. And it really does start and end with that. Like I know people want to look at, they don't have center depth. They don't have all the defensemen. They want to point out every guy in World Juniors that's doing well that they had a chance to draft and they didn't. I get all of that. At the end of the day, you're a better team even this year. You're probably a playoff team this year if you have better goaltending.
Yeah.
By a mile. And what does that come back to? What did I say earlier?
Wow.
Half the league sucks.
Well, if you want to go all the way back to it, it comes back to your starting goaltender having to turn himself into the police last year. But that's a whole different conversation.
Well, of course it does. And I get that, and I get that that's another situation that comes up where it takes something away that you thought you had. But here's the thing. Carter Hart could have put up league average numbers. He was for the most part. And that wasn't good enough to people until you realize what else you have. Until you're rolling out a very raw Aleksei Kolosov, Ivan Fedotov, who doesn't have a lot of experience, Cal Peterson, who's Cal Peterson, Felix Sandstrom, who is Felix Sandstrom, right? Like,
don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone?
Gotcha.
All right, but listen, if we're talking about teams, the Flyers trying to shoot the lights out with teams and trying to score with teams, you got some teams this week that will happily oblige you.
Sure.
Because we're looking ahead here. We got 2 games against the Toronto Maple Leafs. We've talked about that game Sunday night that you'll probably have seen before you listen to this. Then there's a game Tuesday against Toronto, Thursday Dallas, Saturday Anaheim.
All at home.
Those back 3 are all at home. Kevin's going to spend a lot of time at the Wells Fargo Center this week.
Hopefully, weather pending this week.
We talked a little bit about Anthony Stolarz earlier. I don't believe he'll be appearing in either one of these games.
No, I think that's a more long-term thing. It's at least weeks. It's weeks. So
yep.
I don't think there's any question. I'm going to imagine that they're going to get Joseph Wall after probably getting the backup to the backup tonight.
Yeah, you think we get Hill to be on Sunday?
Yes,
and
I do
Wall
think
on Tuesday.
Only because, and like I said, I watched that Toronto Boston game from the night before. Wall gave up 4 goals and faced over 30 shots. You just don't typically see a guy go
running for that, especially in a tandem situation like they've had.
Well, especially for a team that's top 5 in the league.
Yeah.
Like, why would you run one of your goalies into the ground over a situation like, and not
when the other one's hurt? You're playing the Flyers, who are a lower tier team.
Well, and when you're a better team, like a top 5 level team in the league, you're in a position where you can overcome, like you said, you want the good backup performance, right? So, all right, give up 3. We can find a way to score 4. That's the way you approach that game is we'll score 4.
Absolutely.
Give up 3. And to be honest with you, I'm sure that they're going into the game. They're going to know who the starter is on the other side, and they're going to know this guy hasn't played in a month. There's not really I shouldn't say there's not really an advantage. The advantage is still to Toronto. Because at least the goalie that Toronto's playing, now granted, kind of a similar situation. Hildeby only has what, 1 start since October in the NHL. So and I think it was December 15th. So it was still several weeks ago.
Still more recent than Fedotov.
Right. But I'm saying in those 3 starts he's made this season, he's got 2 wins. The goals against is manageable. It's not great, but it's like Well, actually, it's a worse goals against than even Kolosov has. I shouldn't say that, but it was no, but it's when you only have 3 starts and it's really weighted down by one. Like
Yeah.
he's also giving you 2 really quality starts where I think he gave up either 3 or 2, and it's like you got the good backup performance, so he's got it in him. You have a level of trust, and doesn't hurt that you just got Austin Matthews back in your lineup.
And then Thursday, the Flyers play the Dallas Stars. If you've been listening to this show for a while, you know that I've had a soft spot for Rope since before he's come into the league.
I've had a soft spot for like everybody else on the freaking roster.
And they're so good. That team is
you know what?
good.
They're good, but they're one of those teams that's kind of teetered toward the middle this year. It hasn't been smooth sailing.
I think Tyler Seguin being out as long as he has is really hurting the team in the room on the vibes more so than necessarily as far as on ice production goes.
Possible.
Yes.
I think they've also just had like there's certain guys that I think like I'd have to like try to check what they're.
I think Jason Robertson's had a pretty down season,
right? That was
where his numbers
where I
have
was.
been. Wyatt Johnson hasn't done what he's done the last couple of years.
Yeah, because they're what we're at this point. Everybody's approaching the halfway point of the season.
Yeah.
They have basically one guy on the roster who's borderline point per game, and it's Matt Duchene.
Like it's not Matt even Duchene's been good for them,
right? Like it's not even the first guy that you would probably bring to mind. Not Robertson, not Johnston, Mason Marchman's got 27.
Not even like a Heiskanen. I know it's a little different, but
no, Heiskanen's only got 18 points.
That's what I'm saying.
He's not even. He's almost like he's tied anyway, but he's almost not even the top defensive point producer. Thomas Harley's got the same number of points.
Jake Ottinger has had a great season, and that's the only reason they're at where they're at in the standings because they have not been playing.
Yeah, I do want to see their. Yeah, Jake Ottinger's giving you the, but he's
he's on my fantasy team.
But hang on a second, because here's my point: is Jake Ottinger giving you an elite level season?
Contextually, I'd say yes.
Well, sure. You know why? He's got a 235 goals against average, which in this day and age is certainly elite.
Spectacular. Yep.
But he's only got a 910 save percentage, and you'd still sit there and put him right up there with anybody else because he's helping you win games. Like, does that? Oh, he's got 1. Okay, I was gonna say, does Ottinger even have a shutout this year? Because when you look, the first name that pops up is Casey DeSmith with 1. Right. They both have 1, but you get my point. Like, he's giving you a save percentage that, by all accounts, maybe 20 years ago was barely average.
16th in the league.
Right. But it feels elite because you're like, man, 910 save percentage. That's great.
Yep.
That's going to keep us in plenty of games.
Absolutely. And I think the Flyers are at a point where you may not see Ottinger on Thursday, but he is also playing almost all of their games. So you'll probably see Ottinger on Thursday. And then Saturday.
Yeah.
WrestleMania comes to Philadelphia in the form of Cutter Gauthier, his first game in front of the Philadelphia fans. His first game in front of Philadelphia fans in Philadelphia. There sure were a lot of Flyers fans in Anaheim.
But
his first game in the Wells Fargo Center, I assume he's going to develop a nagging injury on Thursday or Friday of this week and be out. But no, I'm joking. I assume he'll play. I assume he'll talk about how much it means, and then I assume he won't do anything in the game again.
Make the more obvious joke right after. So he had said he had the date circled on his calendar about playing the Flyers for the first
the wrong
time,
day.
Right? Well, right,
the next day.
Right, he scored the next game.
Oh yeah, bet big on Cutter Gauthier to score on Sunday or Monday or the next time the Ducks play. He's just not going to do it against the Flyers.
Well, I'm going to assume, without knowing the Ducks schedule by heart, that they have more games on the East Coast, obviously, like over that stretch. That they're not just coming to Philly and then leaving, basically.
No, that's fair.
And they do. So, wow, that's a little odd. They're going to Carolina first, then Washington, then back for Florida. Interesting. You don't see that every day. Usually they would do they'd work their way down the I-95 corridor.
They're zigzagging down 95.
Right. They would reverse that Washington Carolina game so that they would play, Washington to Carolina to Tampa to Florida. Like that's not usually it.
Go home, Pat Verbeek, you're drunk. I'm joking.
Yeah,
they're going to zigzag their way down the 95 corridor, but Saturday, listen, it's pretty similar to the game in Anaheim a couple of weeks ago, where it's two teams in the bottom third of the standings. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily the most impactful game as far as playoff seedings or this, that, the other.
No.
And frankly, I don't even know how much 43 of the 44 players are going to care.
Mhm.
Right, or 39 of the 40 guys on rosters that day are really going to care. But it certainly seems like this kid cares, and Philly will care right back.
Right. So I like, obviously Cutter Gauthier is going to care to a degree, because obviously it's certainly a big situation. I'd like to see Michkov kind of be more on his skates in that, more up on his skates in that situation, because it's kind of, there's going to be an energy. I do think it's another big game, like kind of or significant game, I should say, for Jamie Drysdale, because again, it's the other way around. Drysdale got so embraced when he got here because of the circumstances of that trade that
And
there's
Anaheim fans have no ill will. Like, they're all
right. They loved him. There were
right. That's what I'm saying.
how many signs showed up for him that day?
Dozens.
Right, like there were a lot of people that were saying like, we miss you and all stuff like that, and I know that in a year's time there's certainly some people in Philly that kind of are like, well, they could have him back if they wanted to a degree. Like, there's definitely been some of those out there.
I think that's a little misguided, but I understand.
But like, what I'm saying
Definitely
is
out
like,
there.
again, if you try to use this like as if you're trying to pick up a player, like they tried to make it seem like,
Oh, this is a money on the board game for sure.
well, yeah, but they tried to make it seem like I'm saying from a fan perspective, this guy didn't want to be here. Here's the guy who got thrown into the mix that now belongs, is in Philly. Let's give this guy a big welcoming hug when he gets here and do this. And that's what it was at the beginning of last year. And I kind of think there's an opportunity, especially if he starts, by the way. Like, because I fully expect Cutter Gauthier to start.
Man, if Cutter Gauthier starts, I need you to do me a favor. You know how Lou Nolan comes over about 5 minutes before the game. They announce all the enemy lineup, and the whole crowd goes.
You need video.
I need at least audio. Absolutely.
Oh, I think we're all prepared for that. As long as
that press box is gonna.
Yeah, as long as I am in the building that night, absolutely. Like, if like I said,
clip is gonna go crazy.
It should, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I would put, like, on the other side, I would start Drysdale, and I would try to allow that opportunity for him to be on the other side of that equation to kind of get that warm hug, from the fan base that, is still backing him up. Well, and like to a degree, I know he was struggling a little bit, like Drysdale was. He's been better once you've stabilized him with Nick Seeler.
Yeah, Nick Seeler has been excellent for him.
Yeah, and I believe it that way. And Nick Seeler's looked better for that matter.
The more I sit on it, the more I like that Nick Seeler contract extension. The one that none of us liked last year. Man, I don't know. I don't know, man. That dude is the Scott Lawton of the defense. As far as glue guy, holding it together, getting everybody to play the right way. I'm not saying right this second, I don't necessarily want anybody else to get stripped of it or whatever, but I could see Nick Seeler wearing a letter at some point. I could see him picking up.
Yeah, I believe that. I understand where you're coming from. It depends.
Shot blocks alone.
It depends on who else is here.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't want anybody to get a letter taken off for it.
Well, no, but like if they ever decided to move Scott Lawton because the contract situations are a little different and you keep obviously Sealers here, that's probably a more natural replacement.
I agree. Yeah, no, Nick Seeler is the Scott Lawton of the defense. There you go. There's my hot take for the day. We will be back next week to talk about the Cutter Gauthier game and the other 3 games they played this week, I guess. In the meantime, make sure to follow us on social media. We are at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except for Blue Sky, where he is just at Kevin Durso. We are on Blue Sky as well. Like I said, it's at YWT Podcast. Find us everywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com. And other than that, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us everywhere, tell your friends, share it, etc., etc. Other than that, Kevin, anything else today?
Nope. Busy week.
All right. Busy week. Lots of home games. Cutter Gauthier. Man, it's going to be fun. We'll be back next week to talk about it. Say it.